I joke that sales made a man out of me, like not like in a toxic way, but truly it gave me a worldview. It made me confident. It made me type A. It did all these incredible things for myself that version 1.0 of Case was not. Because I would say version 1.0 of me, younger me, said, I just want to be happy. So I evolved that in my mid 20s to saying, I want to be happy for sure, but what would make me happy? And then I was like, well, you know what would make me happy is if I was proud of myself. That is, if I did the things that made me proud of myself, that would lead me to be happy. I've evolved that one step further now in my 30s. I just want to be honest with myself.
This week, I'm honored to be joined by entrepreneur and host of the New Mindset Who Dis podcast, Case Kenny.
For the most part, most men in their 20s, it's performative masculinity. You are borrowing what you think a man is. Because, I mean, let's be real. When you're 18, you're not a man. Even when you're 25, you're not really a man. I mean, sure, you are physically and on paper. When I think about masculinity, I think about maturity. What is more masculine than a man who is mature in the sense of does what he says he's going to do, is self-aware, is kind to others, is willing to learn the consequences of his actions, how his actions affect other people, who communicates clearly, who doesn't lie, who doesn't cheat. That's maturity. All you touch and all you see and all you believe as a result is all you'll ever be. I mean, like, life is built on experiences, what you touch, feel, smell. Like, we can't think ourselves into the life that we want. And we can't learn from experiences that we haven't experienced. Like, we can form boundaries in theory and what we want in theory, but experience trumps everything.
So I really like the way that the book opens and you have a big list of things that it's really bold of you to do. And I wanted to add one to that list being, it's pretty bold of you to try again. So can you tell me who's Dr. Kalakis? And can you describe the impact of them telling you it's okay to try again?
Wow. What a reference there. Dr. Kalakis is my Latin teacher in middle school and high school, because I took like 10 years of Latin. I think I took 6 years of Latin. So that's who Dr. Kalakis was. Yeah, I mean, the idea of trying again is something that's, kind of a guiding star for me, both when it comes just like personal ethos of life, but also like the definition of mindfulness. Like, I think, for me, probably where you got the reference to Dr. Kalakis is like, I think my life being 35 now is really just a reflection of trying again and again and again and reinventing myself over and over again and deciding to be bold in different areas of life, not in like big, boisterous, crazy ways, but allowing myself to, create new definitions for what makes me happy, create new definitions of success in my career, health, fitness, all these different things. I think my life, and I think a life well lived, is one where you allow yourself to try again. And I think inherent in that is allowing yourself to get it wrong along the way so that you try it again and to be bold in the face of that. And I think that, it's a great topic to start with, certainly the idea of trying again, because encapsulated in that, I was actually just talking to someone about this for like 30 minutes, is the idea of forgiving yourself. Like, if you forgive yourself, which is a huge, big topic, whatever that means, but intrinsic in that is a willingness to try again. Because that's all life is. Life is trusting yourself that in the moment, you have all the information you need to make an informed decision. And whatever happens, you'll allow yourself to forgive yourself so that you'll try again in the future. So I think it's a really powerful way to start, and certainly something that's near and dear to me. So appreciate you bringing that up. That's cool.
Yeah, of course, man. That's what I'm here for.
Nice.
I mean,
nice.
The notion of trying again, I think there's two paths, and one I want to focus on is how we confuse quitting with trying again. So we could say to ourselves, "Oh, I'm quitting on this, like I'm abandoning something," but no, you're really trying again. You went down a path and you realized this isn't for me. I don't want to keep going down this path. I'm just going to waste my time. I'm not going to be happy. I'm not going to feel fulfilled. And then you try again. You try something different, and then maybe you see, does this work? Nope. Try again. Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah.
So I want to bring that to you in college, because I know you started off as pre-med. And then you actually shifted and you said, not for me, let's try again. And you shifted majors and you ended up studying Arabic and Mandarin. So can you talk about that shift and the overall, if there was external pressures from like friends, family, anybody while you're making that shift, how do you feel comfortable doing that? And how do you come to the realization, like, language to me is something that I feel is really important. I want to study this because this is fulfilling to me.
Yeah. The old pre-med to Arabic and Chinese pipeline.
Classic.
Natural pivot. I mean, who hasn't been there? I think simply said, I mean, I think that pivot there is really a reflection of quitting for the better. Like, I think starting off as pre-med was, that certainly was reflective of pressure, from family. My brother's a doctor, and not in a bad way, but just like, oh yeah, do what your brother does. Cause we were similar, smart, the same thing. Pressure to do that, pressure to follow in
Mhm.
his footsteps. Also just traditional career pressure, in this day, parents and people who guided me, traditional career roles, right? You'd be a doctor,
Yeah.
be a lawyer, be a consultant, something like that. um, I think, obviously grateful and privileged to have the blessing of my family and parents to be able to pursue something a little more risky. Once I realized that being a doctor wasn't for me, basically after the first semester, and being like, I don't feel intelligent enough to to take organic chemistry first semester and do well. It was mostly just a story of like, what am I drawn to? And
Yeah.
back to talking about Latin, I was always really good at languages, always just weirdly good. So I decided to choose two languages that I thought had a lot of applicability in the world: Chinese for international business work, and then government work for the Arabic side. Um, and doing that, there was an element of practicality there, of course, of why I chose those languages and what I could do, but also it really was just reflective of diving into what I was good at, diving into what I enjoyed, diving into what I thought the world needed. There was an element of ikigai there, if you're familiar with that concept, like the overlap of what you're good at, what the world needs, what you can get paid for,
Yeah.
what you enjoy doing. So really, that perhaps there was a good starting point for kind of looking on the inside of case rather than the outside. And that was I mean, that was 16 17 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But I think that really kickstarted the journey of like listening to myself versus listening to the world around me, like prioritizing how I felt versus how my life looked to other people. So
Yeah.
definitely a catalyst for kind of where I am now, a decade and a half later.
No, I think that's so awesome, and it's really a testament to you can study anything you want in college, and it does not have to define your life at all. I know it's a trap that a lot of people fall into, but even studying it, is there anything that might surprise the normal person who hasn't dove deep into language? I know you're really big on the verbs that we use, the language that we use with ourselves. Is there anything that you've taken away from your studies of language that you've been able to apply towards mindfulness, towards crafting questions for journals, anything along those lines?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think my study of language really taught me the value of the words we use, not only in the way that we communicate. I'm a psycho communicator. I think communication is everything. I mean, it's the most boring topic in the world, but I mean, I think if you can learn to communicate, you're gonna set yourself up for success. So that's one. But two, yeah, it's word choice. The words that we use in our inner lives and our outer lives is we don't think about it very often. The
Yeah.
words that we use, like even like the difference between I feel anxious and I am anxious, like little modicums of culture and nomenclature really lead to mindsets, and we don't think about it. Because think about it, I am anxious, I am anxious, I'm an anxious person, this is who I am, this is my identity, versus I feel anxious, I'm feeling anxious right now, I have an anxious feeling, whatever it may be. Little things like that add up over time, for one. And then two, when studying a language like Chinese and Arabic, you're learning cultures, right? You're not just learning, sentence syntax and structure. You're learning people. You're learning how people think. You're learning how people communicate. You're learning about culture and family and everything. So I think it really opened me up to one, certain universal nature of just being alive, whether you're in the US or you're in rural China
Yeah.
or the middle of the Middle East. But yeah, I mean, I think the idea of words, obviously now speaking full time and being an author, I've got a close relationship with words, but it really taught me the value of being intentional with how we speak, both to other people and ourselves.
Yeah. I think a fascinating point to transition into, especially with young men, is what does it mean to be masculine? And how do you think your definition of masculinity has evolved from your 20-year-old days towards now?
Yeah, I think it's evolved significantly. I mean, I think for the most part, and it's not a fault, it's not a character fault, it's not anything bad, but for the most part, most men in their 20s and teens, it's performative masculinity. You are
Yeah.
borrowing what you think a man is. Because, I mean, let's be real. When you're 18, you're not a man. Even when you're 25, you're not really a man. I mean, sure, you are physically and on paper, but, where I am at now, 35, is when I think about masculinity, I don't think about any of the crap about, masculine man is powerful. He stands in his power and he's assertive and he's blah, blah, blah. When I think about masculinity, I think about maturity.
Yeah.
Masculinity is maturity. You think about what is more masculine than a mature man? What is more masculine than a man who is mature in the sense of does what he says he's going to do, is self-aware, is kind to others, is willing to learn the consequences of his actions, how his actions affect other people, who communicates clearly, who doesn't lie, who doesn't cheat. That's maturity.
Yeah.
That is masculinity. And I think, and I like the word maturity more than masculinity because, to my point, masculinity has been such a hodgepodge of, phrases and coverage, like toxic masculinity and, masculine versus feminine. Like, we're so in our heads about what it means, what it doesn't mean, what it looks like, that it's become very performative, to the point of being negative, where I think we need to, our whole conversation about words. It's like, stop trying to be masculine. When you try to be masculine, you're going to fail, I think. Try to
Yeah.
be mature. And then because you are a man, it's going to become masculine maturity. And as a woman, it'll be more of a feminine maturity. Sure, if we want to latch onto those words. But I think for me, it's really evolved to just get down to the core of it's maturity.
Yeah.
Maturity is masculinity. A mature person is going to do the things that you would associate with being a masculine type person. So that's where I'm at now. And, it might evolve further. But I think it's a much more peaceful and non-forced way to bring to life what I think are the great parts of being a man, which are, being assertive, being powerful, being strong, these things, but it's wrapped up in emotional intelligence, not, some performative nature of this idea.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And just for your reference, I'm 24, and I completely agree that to be able to say, "Oh, I'm a man," yeah, not yet. We're
You're,
getting there,
you
but
you are a man, not to take away from you being a man, but it's just this idea, right?
exactly, exactly, 100%. And some of the like the structure of this show is trying to talk about roadblocks specifically for people in their 20s and what they deal with, and emotional intelligence is definitely one of those. And when it comes to men particularly suppressing their emotions, I'm noticing it more and more amongst peers, amongst people that I just observe, that when we do that, we are harming ourselves more than anybody else because we're not able to love ourselves. In return, we're not able to give that love out into the world. When you're first starting your journey into mindfulness, can you go over the framework of questions that anybody can really ask themselves to start acknowledging the emotions that they know exist, but they haven't allowed them to come to the surface?
Yeah, I would say two questions to start. I'd say the first one is the one that I don't even have to provide context for it. It's just a question of why. I think
Mhm.
a lot of men suck at getting to the foundation of why they feel the way they feel. Men are in tune with their emotions, of course, but you could feel anxious or jealous or frustrated or depressed, and men will do different things with that emotion. They'll either sweep it under the rug, or they'll allow it to catalyze into some kind of hurtful behavior towards others, self-blame, judgment, these kinds of things. Whereas, to address these emotions in some sense, the question is always going to be why, or why do I think? It doesn't have to be here's why, here's why. It's why do I think in this moment I am feeling this way? That's going to be the start in any journey. Any therapist is going to somehow get you into a why framework to understand where is this emotion coming from, why am I feeling it, what can I do with it, and so on and so forth. So that's
Yeah.
question number one, of course. I think another really good question for men in particular, when it comes into evolving into some kind of mindful journey, is the question of like who are you? Not necessarily, I mean, who you want to be, of course, aspiration, but like who really are you? One of the journal prompts I always come back to, that's a little bit borrowed from habit formation communities, is the idea of I'm the kind of person who, and then you don't complete that with adjectives, you complete it with verbs. Like,
Mhm.
what are the things that you actually do that define who you are and who you want to be? I think a lot of the problem with men and just people in general is we're so latched on to adjectives, talking about the power of words here. I want to be confident, happy, successful, these words that certainly are nice noble goals, but we get so attached to them that in many instances where we're not happy, successful, confident, we really get in our heads and we act out as a result, because we're not going to feel happy, successful, confident at all times. Of course not. And if we're latching our identity to adjectives that can be taken away in a second, we're setting ourselves up for potential frustration in our inner life. So I really like to come back to, particularly for men who are, ostensibly action oriented, is come back to the idea of I'm the kind of person who, and then you insert verb statements. So if you want to say I want to be successful, instead of that, you say I'm the kind of person who does what he says will do, is willing to go first, is willing to try new things, is willing to send 100 emails a day, whatever, industry you're in.
Yeah.
Stick to the verbs, define yourself by what you do, not only as a reflection of giving yourself credit for what you're doing, but also as a roadmap for what you could do to get to that emotion, rather than just sitting in this space of being like, well, I want to be happy. Well, what are you doing to be happy? You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So long-winded rant there, but I think, again, the power of the words we use, how we
Yeah.
identify ourselves. Who are you? Who am I? Start with why, and then define yourself with what you're doing. Give yourself a roadmap to do more or different or simpler. And I think a lot of that clarity will follow suit.
Yeah. And don't worry about a long-winded rant. I love a long-winded rant. It's my favorite. Um, when it comes to that form of clarity, I like to start at the end. And one strategy that I really like is defining my perfect day and working backwards.
Hmm.
So cutting out anything in my life that isn't promoting me to get to that perfect day. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. And it ties into something I've heard you say, and it's defining and crafting your own story. And I've heard you say before, if you want to tell a great story, you have to have a story to tell. And I
Hmm.
feel like a lot of people are kind of like that Netflix show that you're just watching and you have no idea why you're
Yeah.
actually watching it, but you're just like, I just need something on in the background. And you're kind of content with what you have. But they're not willing to take the steps to make it a great story and make it something worth watching. So when it comes to crafting your own story, what are some key non-negotiables that you wanted to make sure were incorporated in your own story so that it would be a story that you yourself were willing to hear?
Yeah. Great question. I would say something that I'm hot on lately is just like the evolution of what my goal is for myself. Like,
Hmm.
my story has to be representative of what I want in life, right? It's not someone else's story, it's my story. And my story is the pursuit of what I have decided that I want for myself, who I want to become, what I want out of life. And I talked about this recently on the podcast, but like my evolution of like what is my purpose of life has changed threefold. Because I would say version 1.0 of me, younger me, said, I just want to be happy, to the point of the rant I just went on. Not a bad goal. Everyone wants to be happy. A lot of people deserve to be happy because they're putting in the work. But again, to my point, happiness is such a fickle thing that it could be taken away. If you're aligning yourself on your ability to be happy at all times, to say you are a happy person, you're gonna be frustrated. So I evolved that in my mid-20s to saying, I want to be happy for sure, but what would make me happy? And then I was like, well, what would make me happy is if I was proud of myself. That is, if I did the things that made me proud of myself, that would lead me to be happy. Okay, now we're talking, because that's going to lead to more honest actions. I'm going to do the things I say I want to do. I'm going to say no to things that distract me. I do the dishes if they're dirty in the sink. I'm proud of myself. And little pieces of being proud, and plus big pieces of being proud, in my estimation, lead to a happy life. So for me, I went from I want to be happy to I just want to be proud of myself. And I've evolved that one step further now in my 30s, is I just want to be honest with myself. And if I'm honest with myself, I think I'll be proud of myself. I think I'll be happy. I think that story is one that I want to write and share, because it's my story. My story is born of my honesty. A story that's not yours is going to be born of someone else's honesty. And that's the problem we get in. I call that the gray of life, where you're just borrowing, you're copying and pasting, you're rushing. It's their timelines. It's all a lot of shoulds. But honesty with yourself leads to, well, I don't need that. They might need that, but I don't need that. Or that's their timeline. That's awesome, but I don't feel rushed right now. That's the kind of honesty that I think can really help you write a story that you look back on and say, yeah, it wasn't perfect. It had ups and downs. I might not have
Yeah.
accomplished everything I wanted to when I was young, but it was my story. And every step along the way, I was doing what I said I wanted to do, or what I felt compelled to do. And I think, I don't know for sure right now, only being 35, but I think when I look back, call it at 60, I'll have much less to regret than if I chased a life of trying to be happy based on randomness or other people's goals. So for me, a story that you write for yourself is one where you can say, I'm proud of myself, but more importantly, I'm honest with myself. And I think that'll really lead to, more positive actions, more honest actions, success, confidence, happiness, all these things that are rather elusive until you get to the core of them through honesty with yourself.
Yeah. And I think that's so important, the aspect of embracing your past, because I think so many of us are trying to run from our past and say, "Oh, there's no regrets. Like everything happens for a reason." But I feel like there should be some things you regret and you learn from. And another thing I've heard you say is that your past does define you in a sense.
Yeah.
That you learn from those experiences and you take them with you. Um, One aspect of your past to get to the point where you are now is you did work a normal, typical quote unquote sales job, and then you had to go through that experience and realize and say to yourself, hey, this isn't for me, but I don't regret the actions that I took, but I know I'm going to pivot out of here, try again, and I'm going to build something and build it into something that I want. Now, just because you left the sales job doesn't mean that there wasn't value to be gained from that. So for anybody who's currently in their 9 to 5, I mean, example one right here speaking to you,
Yeah.
somebody somebody else who's in their 20s, maybe they're like, this isn't for me, but at the same time, I'm sure there's something I could take away from this. Is there anything that you took away, especially working in sales? Is there anything that you were able to take away from the psychology of speaking with people, the psychology of communicating with people, that you've now been able to transition into podcasting, into writing books, that's made you a more effective communicator?
I mean, everything. I would not be here today if I didn't work that job.
Hmm.
100%. I say a couple things. I say, for one, I think everyone in life should do two things. You should wait tables, work in entertainment and some nightlife, or bartend, work, wait tables, do something in the service industry, for one, at some point, not professionally, but do it in your early 20s, as during the summer or whatever.
Yeah.
And the second is, I think everyone should try sales at some point. I joke that sales made a man out of me, like not like in a toxic way, but truly, it truly, truly did. It gave me a worldview. It made me confident. It made me type A. It did all these incredible things for myself that version 1.0 of Case was not.
Yeah.
Pretty introverted, which isn't bad, but pretty introverted, pretty, quiet, didn't speak up. Sales changed all that. It made me realize that I can create something. I could start at zero and build to something. So, I mean, I think it was immensely helpful in my life, for one. Like the way that I talk now, I could speak with confidence and speak clearly. I could not do that before I put 8 years into sales.
Yeah.
So 100% that. It also showed me, I mean, you could make a lot of money from sales, and I did
Yeah.
okay for myself in sales. It showed me that you don't have to accept income wise what you're offered. I mean, when I started working in advertising, I was paid close to minimum wage at this ad agency, which is very common in the ad world. I mean, you make 20, 30 grand as an entry level with a bachelor's degree. It's insanity.
It's crazy.
But
Yeah.
I remember working that job, working hard. I was working on Fortune 500 brands. I had a lot of responsibility. It was very elevated, but I was making no money. And I remember looking around and looking at these salespeople who were literally just the flip side of the coin. We were on the strategy buying side, they were on the technology selling side. And I was like, we're the same freaking people. How are they making 10 times, 20 times what I'm making? I was
Yeah.
like, well, I want to do that. And I hustled my way into a role there and did it. It's not all about money, but it's about proving to yourself that you can sit in a space of, oh, well, I hope I get promoted in a year and get a 3% raise, or you can go out and get it yourself. So there's a lesson there, perhaps. And then I would say, just in general, philosophically, like, how do you know what you want in life? You have to experience what you don't want in life. You can't think yourself into your best job. You have to work a job that shows you that you don't want that job, right?
Yeah.
You have to. It's the same with, like, how do you know what you want in a romantic partner? Well, you probably have to experience a romantic partner who gives you something you don't want, right? It's just the way that life works, right? There's power in contrast. And that's why it's like, I never, as it's not patronizing, but I can't view very many experiences as true failures. Like, even like relationships, talk a lot about relationships. Like, these people who look back on exes and are like, just talk trash about them and say that it was failed love because you're not together forever.
No.
Okay, sure, of course. They don't deserve to be in your life anymore, but failed, you got nothing out of it. You didn't find an ounce of clarity. It's the same with your job. Like, whatever
Yeah.
job you're working that you're saying, okay, this is not what I want to do permanently. Well, what leverage can you get from it in the moment? Like, even with the sales job that I worked for 8 years, I started the podcast in, I don't know, even year 6 of that or so. And I used the financial security of that job as leverage to continue to build my other stuff, so that when I left the job and did this full time, I could go into it with financial leverage, so that I
Yeah.
didn't have to take every brand deal that came my way, or just act out of desperation because, oh my gosh, I don't have any money. I need to make money. Leverage is everything.
Yeah.
And, the idea of side hustling is great because you have leverage. But then, philosophically, it's about finding out what you want to do by experiencing maybe the contrast of that thing. So I think there's an ounce of practicality here and also some depth to it when it comes to working a job, to build for your future, being patient, but also being urgent,
Yeah.
somewhere in between that idea, balance there.
Yeah. And balance is key. And I don't know if you've seen that. There's a video going viral right now. It's of a Gen Z girl, and she's talking about how you've seen this.
Is it in the car about her job?
I think there might be two. So I
Oh,
know there
okay.
was the marketing girl, and she was talking
Yeah,
about her
yeah. Not,
job.
she was
Yeah, you
making
saw that.
30 grand. She was
Yeah, how
complaining
she was
about it.
making 30 grand with a
Yeah.
bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
That one I feel like speaks to time horizon. But
That
there is
one, that
another one
one
that's
triggered
going
me.
viral right now, and it's of a Gen Z girl, and she's talking about how she just started working her 9 to 5. I think she's in New York City, and she's saying, I have to get up so early. I have 3 hours total of commuting. Then I have to work 9 to 5. Then I have to come home. I have no energy. I'm so tired. I have no time for social life. I can't date anybody. I have no time to meet anybody. How do you do this for the rest of your life? Like this structure makes no sense. And there's a lot of commentary from people older
Mhm.
being like, oh, toughen up. And then there's a lot of people
Right.
in Gen Z saying, like, you're right, the system's broken. But I think what I want to frame this as is okay, so she's being honest with herself. She's saying, this is not for me. So now she has to do the next step, which is take action. So she has to find a way to time manage, to build up a side hustle while she's doing it. Because I think you and I would both agree that maybe jumping into that side hustle and just foregoing the income that you have, foregoing that safety net, might not be the best approach. Maybe it is for somebody. Maybe the best approach is, I'm gonna risk it for the biscuit, and I'm just gonna go all in. And if I don't make it, I don't make it. But if you want to play it safe, you have to be able to time manage appropriately. So for anybody who's in that same position as this girl was talking about, and she's feeling like I have no energy, I just can't feel like I have no time to do anything, what recommendations would you give to them? Because like you said, you were able to successfully scale something on the side. I'm sure you maintain a social life, a relationship life, all at the same time, and there's ways to do it. So what type of framework, what type of strategies would you offer to somebody who's looking to do that?
Yeah. I'll caveat what I'm about to say, and that I'm a pretty sensitive guy, right? I
Mhm.
say I share my feelings for a living. I really try to approach everything with empathy and an element of softness.
Yeah.
But I, I think I think any complaining, I haven't seen the video, and I'm sure she's coming from a place that's true to her.
Hmm.
But I hear stuff like that, and I'm like, I mean, I don't want to sound like a boomer, but it's like, well,
Yeah.
toughen up, like for a couple of different reasons. For one, like we make time for what's important to us, we do.
Yeah.
So if you're not making time for the solution to your problem, which you said is the problem, then you don't actually truly want a solution. You just want to vent about it, which is fine. Go off, go off. I look at my experience. I Sales is really tough. It's very competitive. There's no straddling the line between doing well and not doing well. It's all numbers. It's very clear. And I did it for a long time. And I traveled twice a week. I operated out of Chicago, and I was in Kansas City and St. Louis and Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland and Denver and all these places. I was there twice a week. Always fly, rent a car, go to a meeting, take clients out that night, go to sleep, get up, do it the next day, fly back to Chicago. I did it for years. And I also wrote and did the podcast for years at the same time. There's really just, obviously there are circumstances where you literally don't have time. I get it. I do.
Yeah.
Like if you're some industries, medical, maybe law, some consulting, you're working for McKinsey, sure. I get that you literally are in the office and you don't have time. If you have a 3-hour commute, that's 3 hours where you can be working. Truly, like I
Yeah.
I I wrote every single episode of my podcast in Ubers and on the plane, so that when I landed, I would record it and go to sleep.
Yep.
I did it for years and years and years because I wanted to, and because I was passionate about it. So I think there's an element here of finding out what you actually want to do, and then finding a way to do it. But then also just keeping yourself honest. Like if you're not making time for it and you're leaning on excuses like, "Well, I'm just too tired," that's fine. Listen to your body for sure. But you also have to be honest with yourself and saying if you would rather rest than do the thing that you might see as the solution to a problem which you've identified, then you don't want it that bad. And that's fine. And that's fine. But we have to be honest with ourselves. And yeah, I think we're in a really interesting place now in the culture of work and work from home and just hustle culture. I think it's really interesting. And I don't know the answer to it, certainly. I think we owe it to ourselves to not define ourselves by work. I think we're in dangerous territory here with some of that. But I
Yeah.
think if you sit down and you're saying, this is taking all my time. I would rather be doing this. I think this might be the solution to my problems, but I don't do it. It is what it is. You don't want it bad enough, and that's fine. That's
No,
fine. So, it's a little bit of tough love, but I mean, we make time for what's important to us. We do. We really
everybody
do.
gets
And
24
it might
hours.
not be
Yeah.
consistent. It might not be consistent. We may not be able to do it at the best time. And, we might have to be a little bit more tired than we normally would. But if we're honest with ourselves, we make time for the people that are important to us and the things that are important to us amidst all the crap that life has to offer. Um, and that's the facts as I see them.
No, I agree. I mean, I just think about what I do with this own podcast. Anytime I have a free moment, I'm working on this because it's what I love doing. I don't feel like it's work. Someone might
Right.
say like, "Oh, you work all the time." But it's like, not really. Like I'm doing what I like. And for anybody who's struggling to find that thing, one of the best pieces of advice I've ever heard is, "What do you do when you're procrastinating? Like, what do you turn to? Do that for the rest of your life." Like if it's reading, like if it's writing, find a way to do that for the rest of your life. It's pretty easy framework. And hustle culture, I find it fascinating because new mindset who this was actually the slogan of one of your first businesses, which was pursuit, or like the unofficial slogan I saw.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And
Mhm.
the one of the first podcasts that you did was the hustle sold separately. And the idea of hustle, I think, like you just said, there's a toxic definition where it can lean in towards, we're hustling all the time and it's all we got to do, grind set and sigma, all this stuff that people like to say. But I think that there's a line that can certainly be crossed into, okay, you have to try to find a balance between being a man, which could mean making time for a family, making time for a relationship, trying to even out. But at the same time, I'm also not the biggest proponent of the traditional definition of work life balance, where you look at it in a small time frame. I'm much more of a proponent of long term work life balance, where maybe
Mm.
you're in your 20s, you were pouring in work now, so that when you get to 30, 35, now you have a little more free time, and now you can really develop a relationship. If you choose to have a child, you can spend time with the child and stuff like that. What do you think about that, just in terms of how you viewed hustle in your 20s while you were building towards how you view hustle now? Was there anything that you would have done differently that maybe, I don't want to call it regret, but maybe you think back and you say, oh, I didn't need to do that, I would have gotten to the same point?
Yeah, it's a good question and great research. Obviously, Hustle Sold Separately feels like a lifetime ago. You know, I don't know, because sometimes I feel like I still fall into the hustle culture thing. You ask my
Hmm.
girlfriend, I'm always working.
Yeah.
I'm always hustling. I'm always trying to find a way. I'm always trying to get in a place where I don't belong. Like, that's just what I do.
Hmm.
And so I wouldn't change anything along the way as far as like doing and action and commitment and time. I think the thing I would change would be the why behind it and the introspection behind it. It's like,
Yeah.
why am I doing these things? Like, what am I trying to prove? Is this aligned, to your point, with a larger vision I have for myself that goes beyond hitting a sales quota this quarter or whatever my goal is in the near term? I think a lot of my, incentive early on with sales and everything that I created, and even some like early business ventures that flopped, was like, make money, make money, make
Yeah.
money. And I think that's fine. Like, I like money. I like to make money. I like to use skills to make money. I love capitalism's great, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I think there was an element of dishonesty there that didn't align with what we talked about earlier of, am I being honest with myself around why I'm doing these things? And I think now I'm very honest with why I do what I do. And it's a productive passion because I love it. I
Yeah.
love doing it. And I think when that's the case, be in hustle culture because it's so aligned. Like, I, 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 I struggle with the idea that like your work and your life should be separate. Like, a lot of people say that. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that. I think like the best work comes from people who align their life with their work.
Yeah.
And I think that's not always easy to do, of course. But I think you can find a way to do it. I might be the exception, but for me, it's like my work is so intrinsically connected with myself that every time I do the podcast or write, I am bettering myself.
Yeah.
And so why wouldn't I be passionate about it? Why wouldn't I hustle my way to do it even more and bigger and better and more at scale? But I think there's a version of that that everyone can tap into. And I don't have the blueprint for that. If you're in law or you're a cardiologist, I don't really know what that looks like, but I think there's an element there for it. So like I am pro hustle culture as long as it's defined by honesty of why you're doing it.
Yeah.
If you're doing it for Lambos on Instagram, if you're doing it for, validation to pick up women, yeah, that's where we get into the problem where, you're going to beat yourself into the ground for no good reason. But I think if you attach it to an element of what we were talking about earlier, being proud of yourself and with honesty, I think you're going to end up where you belong. And it might take a while for sure. I mean, I don't think I
Oh yeah.
really found my stride until I was probably 33 or so, just a couple years ago. So we have to have patience with ourselves along the way.
Oh yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. And to be completely honest with you, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I view you as like the example of where I want to go with my life and align my work with my life. Being able to self-reflect, talk to people, have these conversations, create something that people really need and they really want in terms of helping them with their mental health. And like you said, I'm 24 right now. I'm still in the groundwork phase. Just having these conversations, just laying the groundwork for where I want to get in life, both in my personal life and work life. I think you see it a lot with there's so many studies on senior citizens that if they they retire and then they don't do any work,
Yeah.
not to be morbid, but they die quicker. Like
Yeah.
they just don't have a purpose anymore, and they don't feel fueled to do anything. So work is not a monster. It's not the enemy. It's something that we should aspire to. And for
Mm.
anybody who's listening and they're saying, I have this awesome idea, but the market's just so saturated. Like I really want to do clothing, but everyone does clothing. I really want to make my own podcast. Everyone has a podcast. How do you go about telling people there's a slice of the pie for everybody here? Maybe it's 0.1% of the pie, but that 0.1% could still be pretty damn lucrative.
Yeah. I straddle the line sometimes between thinking I'm a great entrepreneur because I've had some great moments, and also just a clueless entrepreneur because I truly don't have a plan. And I think that's fine. I think we need to rid ourselves of this mentality of like, to be successful, it requires a big exit and a huge company and employees and this and that and the other. I mean, I started my entrepreneurial journey by creating a journal and selling it. And I've sold a lot of it and I've done really well. But I almost talked myself out of it because I was like, oh, Tim Ferriss has a journal. Why would I do a journal? What am I doing comparing myself to Tim Ferriss? What am I doing comparing myself to the 50 other companies that sell journals? I mean, I do agree that there's a space for everyone to win as long as you're creating something of value and you're clever with marketing it. I think everyone can win because you
Mhm.
don't need a $10 billion company to win. You need 10 grand a month in profit to win, 20 grand a month in profit to win. You don't need to buy into this startup idea that you need to grow something and have EBITDA and do whatever. Sure, you can do that. Grow a tech company if you want.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I support you. But you could also create something small and personal and just be freaking smart about it and incrementally grow it. Everyone is capable of that. Everyone is capable of it. And you could do it. There's so many companies that empower you to do these kinds of things, from warehousing companies and logistics companies to manufacturing companies that will literally help you every step of the way. You need some leverage, of course, financial leverage to get started. That's why I recommend, finding that and creating that for yourself. But I think talking yourself out of trying because it's been done before by someone else in this day and age, everything's been done. Like there's very few ideas that are truly unique and innovative and are truly 0 to 100 ideas.
Yeah.
Everything's been cracked at in a sense. So if that's your mentality of whether you should do something or not, well, then you're going to be doing nothing. I think you need to take a look at what would you do different, unique, even if your unique edge is trying harder. I think it's worth a try. Truly, truly is. I mean, I make a living from sharing my feelings. And I
Yeah.
think as a salesperson, I would have thought that's the stupidest thing ever. And I did, in fact. And a lot of people I let, judge me unfairly for that. But, you know, there's a way to make money for
Yeah.
one. And there's a way to be different for two. And we just have to be honest with ourselves about that and not buy into these tropes. Stay off Twitter. For one, you're going to talk yourself out of everything if you're on Twitter because
Yeah. For
everyone is
real.
bigger and better and has more revenue than you on Twitter. So,
Yeah.
don't get in your own head with some of this stuff. Yeah, don't get in your own head.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I felt trapped into that. So much of the content that I consume specifically on Twitter, it's just like
Yeah,
a little
yeah,
bubble. It's just like, oh, I suck. Just trying to
yeah.
break out of that.
That is literally the only conclusion you're going to arrive at is, welp, I suck. And these
Nah,
these people are billionaires,
yeah.
so I wouldn't. Don't bother.
But I think it ties into another concept you talk about in the book, and you reference Seinfeld when you talk about it. Is, do the opposite of what you normally
Yeah,
do. So if you normally talk yourself out of it, wake up tomorrow and be like, whatever, I'm gonna do it. Screw it. Let's see what happens. And you never know what's gonna happen. I doubt there's a lot of men listening to this who are gonna wake up and say, I'm really in the mood to share my feelings today. Like they're probably just going to suppress it, but just do the opposite. Talk about it. See what happens. Just talk to your friends about it. Talk to your mom, your dad. See their reaction. And I guarantee you, if you open up and you're more vulnerable, people love vulnerability. It's one of the best things you can do is just show that you're human, and people will respond to that. Especially what you've done. You've built a business upon being vulnerable, and on top of that, I wish more of your audience was men because I wish more people would see
Yeah,
the
me
impact that
too.
you're having. Um,
Yeah.
but your audience is predominantly women, and being able to hear feedback from women in terms of their struggles, what they have to go through on a daily basis, and, their opinions on men. How has that helped you maybe in your own personal life when it comes to sharing ideas and thoughts with other men in your life, maybe with some friends, some close family members, just having this perspective that other men are really afraid to reach out and even ask for?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, having mostly women as my feedback loop for a long time. I mean, my audience is maybe like 70-30. It's definitely
Yeah.
growing in men, which is great. Learning from women for one has given me a more of a sense of empathy because I could look at a woman and be like, why are you overreacting, or why are you being so emotional right now, as like a younger case.
Hmm.
And then, I think it's given me a sense of just because I personally wouldn't feel the way that someone else feels doesn't invalidate that feeling. And I think
Yeah.
that is maturity, that is masculinity there for one. So it's really given me a sense of like universal empathy towards just the way that humans are wired, male, female, however you identify.
Yep.
I think on the, on the male front, I don't know. I feel like this whole thing of like men not sharing their feelings is almost like not true. Like it is true, of course. There are a lot of men who are less inclined to be honest and vulnerable for many reasons. The
Yeah.
same reasons that women don't as well, but also the reason of, men are supposed to be rocks and centered, and anything less than that means they're not masculine. So the whole thing
Yeah.
there. Personally, I being in Miami, for instance, I have met a lot of people, men, and high value men, professional athletes, wealthy, successful people. And we sit down, and within a matter of minutes, we're being honest and open and vulnerable. So I really do think a lot of it comes down to the company you keep, for
Yeah.
one. Like I had dinner the other night with an NFL player. He played for the previous Super Bowl champs. Within minutes, we were talking about how he felt insecure in a certain area of his life. Within minutes, I really do think it's the people that you keep around you. Like my close circle of guy friends. Like we have a text thread where oftentimes we'll pop in and we'll share pictures of our journal entries, like
Yeah.
over the top emotional stuff. But these stories of men refusing to feel. I think a lot of the time that it's devoid of context, for one. But I certainly think it happens within the context of loneliness as an epidemic, for sure. If you're a
Yeah.
man, men are increasingly lonely. Like that is a huge problem, and you don't have a circle where you can be open. I think that's probably where we need to highlight, versus this trope of like men are emotional as creatures, and it turns into these bad things. I think we need to encourage men to surround themselves with men who bring that vulnerability out of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the solution here. Part of the solution here, in addition to personally incentivizing yourself to be open and honest, but you've got to surround yourself with people who want that from you. If you're a man
Yeah.
and you're surrounding yourself with guys who clown on you for saying how you feel or make fun of you, you're with the wrong people,
Yeah. What are you doing?
100%.
Yeah.
So I think we have to start looking there at like who we're surrounding ourselves with. Certainly.
100%. I agree with you again. There's again, the mental health conversation, I love the direction it's going, but I do think it is a lie that like men can't say anything. Like, of course we can. And we just need to get in the correct circles. And with loneliness, particularly, the term that goes around a lot on the internet is like men becoming incels and having no
Right.
desire to even go out and find a relationship with a woman. They're perfectly content with having no love. And we reject this notion that we don't need love for some reason, which is totally a lie. We're built upon love. That's human nature for as long as we can go. And specifically with men who are in touch with their emotions, but they get labeled as the nice guy. And they say to themselves, "Oh, I can't get a girl because I'm a nice guy." I think those type of men have this false reality in their head where it's not because you're a nice guy. It's because you're not setting up boundaries for yourself. You're not setting a line for yourself saying, "Okay, this is the point where I'm not going to allow anyone to walk over me." You have to have that edge to you. You don't have to be a tyrant, but at the same time, you don't have to be someone who allows yourself to be walked over. So for the nice guys out there who are unwillingly falling into that incel population now because they're not willing to get out into the dating market and try again, how would you go about advising them to, first of all, be in touch with their emotions, embrace them, don't suppress them, and try not to be the nice guy anymore? But the second time, be confident in yourself and say to
Yeah.
yourself, here's the boundary.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's such a great topic. I mean, yeah, I think the easiest advice, which I agree with you wholeheartedly, is like be a nice guy, but don't be a pushover. Be a
Yeah.
nice guy, but have a worldview. Be a nice guy, but have your own priorities. That's the solution. I think where guys get into trouble is they start assuming that negative outcomes are a result of them being a nice, compassionate guy. And the reality is, if a girl says that, hey, this isn't working out, you're too nice of a guy, that's not your fault. That's her fault. You're with
Mhm.
someone who you don't want to be with. A girl who tells you that she wants a bad guy, you don't want anything to do with that girl. I'm sorry, you don't. That is just an immature freaking mindset. And yeah, because there's times in life where you want excitement, you want a little bit of edge. Sure,
Yeah.
fantastic. But that's not the time in life where you're going to settle down. That's not the time in life where you're going to find that person. So we've got to stop taking those moments that happen in the same way with when men give feedback to women for being too sensitive or too needy or too this or too that. It goes both ways. We cannot take that unsolicited feedback and allow it to become a label of how we see ourselves. Being a nice guy is your greatest attribute, as long as it comes with not being a pushover, having a worldview, loving yourself, not attaching all of your happiness to a partner. I think if
Mhm.
you have all the latter, if a girl tells you you're too much of a nice guy, it is peace out, that I'm moving on. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of these people who gravitate towards these really negative views of women in the world, it's because they're attaching their identities to these feedback people who misunderstand them, or people who just you just don't want anything to do with them. You
Mm.
don't want someone who wants a bad boy. You don't
Yeah.
want someone who wants a crazy girl. Like, those are just times in life where you're just being a little immature, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And I still think you could be a nice guy and still be exciting and have edge and be spontaneous and do all these things. But I think it's a mix here of establishing boundaries, like you said, but also not allowing other people's definitions of you to become your own, and then forming a unfair worldview as a result.
Yeah. When it comes to the modern dating market, of course, there's so many pieces on it, so many pieces of content talking about how screwed up it is, how people just can't even engage anymore. If you're a man, I know for myself, I one of the pieces I had to look at. So I'm 5'7". I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to pretend my height. But like, if you go on a dating app and you say you're 5'7", you automatically get filtered out of 90% of all of
Hmm.
women's dating profiles, which is crazy. But I mean, it's not a reason to not play the game. And we can go on and on about dating apps. But what I really want to talk about is, when you go out there, hold a standard for yourself. And I'm talking to the men specifically and women too. Hold a standard for yourself. Don't settle for something like you just talked about. Don't settle for something that you don't want. Have some sense of non-negotiables. And one thing again you mentioned in the book that I thought was really funny. It wasn't like a non-negotiable for you, but you were talking about a relationship that you had, and you remarked about how the girl you're with didn't have a sense of curiosity, and it was something that it stuck out to you, and you said to yourself, "Is this really something? Is this a trait that I want to have in my partner?" And sometimes people will settle for it because it's better than being alone. And they'll say to themselves, oh, I could put up with this. And then it transitions to, oh, she does this too. I could put up with that. And it just snowballs and it snowballs and you build this toxic
Right.
relationship for yourself. So for you personally, what are some of the non-negotiables for you in terms of a relationship? Maybe how you guys communicate with each other, or just what you look for in a woman that is going to make you the best version of yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I would say curiosity remains the same.
Mhm.
I think one of the things that I'm like insane about, that my girlfriend makes fun of me a lot for, but she embodies it, which is great, is the idea of just doing the difficult things in life. That's my whole mentality. Anything. If it's difficult, you have to do it. You have to
Yeah.
do it. Not because it's some like machismo, gotta do difficult things, but everything good is on the other side of difficult things. Whether the difficult thing is being honest, whether the difficult thing is doing another rep, whether the difficult thing is leaving a job and starting a new one, whatever it may be. You have to do the difficult things. And I want to be with someone who is willing to do the difficult things, who doesn't just roll over when things get tough, blame other people when things get tough. So, I mean, really, it's maturity, it's curiosity
Yeah.
and maturity. I mean, that is a non negotiable. for me, because it encompasses a lot more than just those things. But I think the idea of doing the difficult things is such a willingness to do the difficult things is so emblematic of all the traits you would want in a partner, because it requires empathy, it requires commitment, it requires discipline, it requires communication. So I think for me, find someone who's willing to do the difficult things, who's willing to be awkward, who's willing to be embarrassed, who's willing to be a beginner. To me, that's super super attractive.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it's a non-negotiable.
Nice. Uh, Kind of similar when it comes to having similar hobbies, similar interests. For you two particular, how does EDM play into your relationship?
Yeah.
Just in terms of how it gets you in your mindset, the interactions that you have with each other, just being in the events, or if you go to like concerts, if you go to DJ sets, anything like that.
I mean, I think music is such an integral part of a mindfulness practice. Like music is literally purpose built to get you in a headspace that is intentional. And for me, dance music, something about the repetition of it, break, build, drop, the BPM, the lyrics, the melodies, the way that it's designed. It's always been something that gets me into a vulnerable headspace. My girlfriend and I share a passion for dance music. I mean, she DJs and produces, and I produce, and I work with artists as well. So, I mean,
Yeah.
we really bond over going to shows and, just finding a shared joy in them, sober, whatever. Like we just really enjoy that. And I think that's a shared interest,
Yeah.
but it's also a shared, foundation for mindfully, being honest and open on your own. So I really encourage people, if you're finding yourself avoiding honesty with yourself, or you're not journaling that well or something like that, is try listening to some dance music,
Yeah.
see how it makes you feel. And maybe it'll give you that little push to be like, well, I just felt something. What is this feeling? And then maybe
Yeah.
you talk about it, or maybe you journal about it, or maybe you walk about it, or something that just gets it out of you.
Oh yeah, my roommate's a huge EDM guy, so he's got me really into it. I'm
Yeah.
so mad. I just missed Fred again. We had tickets and we couldn't go. We got to see like Tiesto the other day. There's nothing like it. Two friends I got to
Yeah.
see multiple times. Like they're great. When
Nice.
it, what about producing? I know you did Call Myself Smiling. What did that feel like, just in terms of being able to be on the production end and use a different creative format? I know writing, speaking, it's a lot different than actually trying to produce music.
It was challenging for sure, because I mean, a lot of production isn't just musical; it is technology. How well you can use these production softwares. So I think that was really rewarding for me, just to put something out there
Yeah.
and showcase my passion. I think what I've realized now is I like collaborating with artists. To me, it really brings the best of both worlds together, their incredible skill and talent and my skill and talent, and you bring it together. Actually, tomorrow I'm releasing a mix. I haven't talked about this yet, but I'm releasing a 100% original production with Incubus.
Oh
So
wow.
not dance music, actually. Very unique, very different from anything I've ever released in the past, which is really, really cool. And I liked it because Mike Einziger, who's the founder of Incubus and lead guitarist, did such a great job with it. He just allowed me to do my great job with what I do. So it was
Yeah.
very unforced, very organic, and pretty proud of it. And it was cool. But again, just the power of music and mindfulness, it, just continues to
It's
pull on
everything.
my heartstrings.
I can't even imagine what a world without music would be like. It would be so boring.
Yeah,
It would be
no,
awful. I I want to end on another quote that you posted one time, and it's actually lyrics, and it's all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be, and that's Pink Floyd. And you posted that, I think it was a couple years ago, and you were like,
yeah.
this is one lyric that really just sticks out to me. You think that would be a lyric still that defines like a core theme for your life? Anything new that's come up in that time span that really sticks out to you?
Yeah, I think it's still so true. I would
Yeah.
maybe add to that, like, all you touch and all you see and all you believe as a result is all you'll ever be. I mean, like, life is built on experiences, what you touch, feel, smell. Like, we can't think ourselves into the life that we want, and we can't learn from experiences that we haven't experienced. Like, we can form boundaries in theory and what we want in theory, but experience trumps everything. And we
Yeah.
need negative experiences. Unfortunately, we've got to touch and smell and experience some bad things along the way in order to know what we want. And yeah, I like that quote. Thanks for putting that back on my radar. I mean, I think
Yeah,
it's
of
everything.
course.
I think we need to encourage ourselves to, add a little chaos to our lives. Seek
Yeah.
it out. Seek out some unpredictability. not because we're masochists or anything weird, but because we see the value in it,
Yeah.
the value in getting out into the real world, and our ability to make sense of it.
Yeah, I think it ties back to how we started. Be bold. Just try something. Try
Bold.
something different. You
Easy
never know where
answer.
it's gonna go. Easy answer.
Yes,
I wanna
agreed.
I wanna give you the last question that I ask everybody, and it's been such a pleasure. I can't believe the hour's flown by already. After everything that you've gone through so far, what have you learned about love?
I would say, simply put, I mean, it's a choice and it's a verb. As much as it is a feeling, of course, it's something you do, and it's something you do together, and that is the lens that we need to look at it. You could feel in love, but I think truly being in love is reflective of you doing the difficult things, your willingness, your eagerness to do it, your eagerness to reciprocate them doing it. That is love. I think a lot of people sit in the comfort of feeling in love and wanting this feeling, and that certainly is a great upside of it, but it all comes down to the choices we make amidst easier ones, amidst more selfish ones. So I think you find someone who's willing to do the things that reflect love, and you find yourself wanting to do them and you do them as well. That is a healthy relationship. Not just relying on a feeling, not just relying on, oh, we have compatibility or we feel great together. It's, do you do the things that reflect love? Do you hold yourself accountable and them accountable to it? I think that really helps you break out of a lot of the problems we get in, which is like getting duped by potential rather than reality, things like that. So just actions, choices, to me, that is love, because it's reflective of love.